Not really.
We will start after everyone can mute themselves at this point. That would be helpful. Okay, great. All right, I'll go ahead and get started then. Good evening, everybody. I'm Greg Alvarez, along with Talisha Saintville. We are the co-chairs of the Housing and Land Use Committee for this meeting tonight on April 4th, 2022. We're here this evening. It's sort of as a prelude to our public hearing that will take place at 7 o'clock involving an MIH or Mandatory Inclusionary Housing matter that's been brought before us. So to assist us with that, we thought it might be helpful to schedule this committee meeting ahead of it. And we are lucky enough tonight to have David Weissglass from the New York City Department of City Planning here to provide us a brief overview, a brief primer on mandatory inclusionary housing that might aid in our review of the application. So since time is short, I'll turn it directly over to David if you're ready to proceed with your presentation. And then after that, hopefully we'll have a few minutes for any questions. So David, please proceed when ready.
Sorry about that. Did you see? I want to make sure I had the. Did you see my presentation when I put it up? Or
not
actually,
yet.
I'll just do it. Sorry, one second.
Sure.
Let me share it. All right. That
there
should
we
be
go.
better. How about now?
There
Great.
it is. Yes. Okay. Fantastic.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
I know it takes some time sometimes to for the slides to change from one to the other, so I'll be a little bit slower. First of all, hello everybody. For those of you I have not had the pleasure of meeting, my name is David Weissglass. I am the liaison to CB14 for the Department of City Planning. I'm working in the Brooklyn Borough office. Joined in about June of this past year, so I'm still relatively new. But I've met quite a few of you, enjoyed my time so far, and hope to be a good resource to you, and that starts now. So this is a very, very quick overview of mandatory inclusionary housing, but I'll touch upon inclusionary housing just in general as a tool that's used in a number of cities, across the country and internationally as well. The history of how it's applied in New York, and then of course going on to MIH, mandatory inclusionary housing, which is what we see a lot of the times here in New York City. So I'm going to, get pretty brief upon some of the other aspects of affordability and just kind of move on to MIH relatively quickly, but with a little bit of background. So first is why we need inclusionary housing, and kind of the background behind inclusionary, not necessarily MIH, but inclusionary as general. What inclusionary housing is as a concept. Different inclusionary housing programs we have had in New York and still have currently in New York City. The introduction of MIH and when it came about, and as well as kind of when the different inclusionary housing programs came about. How MIH is applied and in which situations it actually applied. And finally, the nitty-gritty details, the meat and potatoes of the actual MIH options and the requirements upon builders. So first, the why, and this is one I want to state that's very important. Is you see this map on the right basically shows the change of households earning 80% or less of area median income in 2012, and I'll discuss what AMI and area median income is a little bit later. For those who may not know, but basically for those who are making less than 80% of AMI. We see that this heat map shows that there are a lot of neighborhoods, particularly a lot in Manhattan and in downtown Brooklyn and nearby in the northern and western part of Brooklyn, in which they have lost a significant number of households that are making less than 80% AMI. Basically, this is a lot of economic segregation, and neighborhood scale economic diversity is something that's very important. It's something that's been important in New York City neighborhoods for decades and decades and decades, and it's something that we want to preserve. And this filtering of economic segregation, where certain neighborhoods are reserved only for wealthy people, and other neighborhoods that have other economic segregation issues, is not something that the city is keen on maintaining. We want to make sure that neighborhoods are accessible to a wide variety of people, regardless of their economic situation. So, inclusionary housing seeks to be one of the tools that helps provide that. It doesn't necessarily seek to solve all of our affordable housing issues. We understand that people experiencing homelessness or those who have trouble staying in one place due to eviction issues or other problems with housing. We know that there's a lot of those. And we know that there are a need for way, way, way more units than MIH can provide. And there are a number of other tools that we have available that we seek to, mitigate those issues. But really, mandatory inclusionary housing and inclusionary housing in general seeks to mitigate this economic segregation issue. You want to make sure that neighborhoods are economically diverse, make sure that different people have access to all kinds of neighborhoods. All right, so inclusionary housing. Inclusionary housing, like I said, is not just here in New York City. It's a tool utilized in a number of different cities that are experiencing economic segregation and a lack of economic diversity within their neighborhoods at the local level. So basically, here in New York, the inclusionary housing program is designed to preserve and promote affordable housing within neighborhoods where zoning has been modified to encourage new development. And that basically makes sense. It basically says that the city, the powers that be, and the city council and the city planning commission are saying, that we're going to make sure that different neighborhoods, we're going to modify the zoning such that we want to encourage new development. And if we're going to do that, we want to make sure that that new development is economically diverse, right? And so basically what it says is that in an area that is mapped with an inclusionary housing like overlay, basically, it's not really an overlay, that's not accurate, but places are mapped with different inclusionary housing options. Any builder that is building within that area and building a certain square footage and a certain number of units, we'll get to that in a minute, they're required to reserve a portion of that floor area or a portion of those units to be made affordable to low and moderate income New Yorkers. We'll get into the specifics of what that means here towards some of my later slides, but that's the general gist of it. Is you can't just build a building of all market rate units. If you're building a building that's large enough and meets some of the minimum criteria, a certain percentage needs to be reserved to be affordable. In exchange, and to basically make that pencil out for a builder, we will allow sometimes some slight density increases or height increases. But those are only allowed if you're actually taking advantage of the affordable housing programs that are available to you. In MIH areas, that's where the mandatory comes in. It's required. But as we'll talk about in a minute, there are other areas where it's not actually mandatory. And I'll get into vertical, horizontal, and bedroom mix requirements at the end as well. All right, so a little bit of background. Inclusionary housing programs in New York, first introduced in 1987. We had a voluntary bonus for R10 districts only, and those were in higher density residential districts, almost always in Manhattan. In 2005, as part of the Greenpoint Williamsburg rezoning, we introduced voluntary inclusionary housing. And then 2016, of course, we said no more voluntary. It's mandatory now in these areas. And let's get into the details of these a little bit. The 1987 one is for R10 districts. And I'm not going to read all this because I want to get to MIH pretty quick. But basically, R10 saw 90% of the residential development that we had occurring in like the 70s and 80s. And we basically said that, if this is where the residential development is occurring, we want to make sure that we can maintain economically diverse areas. And so this was introduced as an option to encourage builders to take advantage of this option. There were some slight bonuses that I'm not actually sure about all the details of what those bonuses were, but they were, relatively minor considering R10 were some of the bulkiest districts allowed anyway for residential development. And in exchange, there was some bedroom mixes and affordable housing requirements in there. Moving on to 2005, they had inclusionary housing designated area programs. This is basically voluntary inclusionary housing. IHDA is sometimes just another way of saying where those areas are mapped, and those are still maintained today, and you can find them on Zola. So again, created as part of the Greenpoint Williamsburg rezoning, which is of course a big one. And we said, we don't want to reserve this just for R10s now. We also want to make sure that our medium density residential districts are allowed to provide assurances that new development will include affordable housing. It's not mandatory, but a number of builders had taken advantage of the opportunity already because it's got great incentives built into it. So a little bit of background before we get to MIH of just where these areas are mapped. So the R10 program, not surprisingly, in green is almost always in Manhattan. So we saw a lot of those areas mapped on the Upper East Side, Upper West Side, and some down in the financial district, basically all around. We also see a little bit in downtown Brooklyn as well. And so those areas where R10 were mapped still have those areas where folks can take advantage of that program. Then the inclusionary housing designated areas are all in red. So again, like I said, part of the Greenpoint Williamsburg rezoning. There are these two up here, and basically any development where that is adding residential development has the opportunity to take advantage of the incentives there to provide affordable housing in Greenpoint and Williamsburg. And we've seen that occurring already with a lot of the development. And then some scattered areas below, because it could apply not only to public applications like the Greenpoint Williamsburg rezoning, which was city-led, but also to private applications as well. All right. I'm going to get on to MIH, but real quick, any questions so far? All right. I will move on to mandatory. Oh, I'm so sorry.
Hold up, David. It does look like there was a question from Steve Cohen. That's okay. That's why I'm jumping in. Steve?
My question, I don't know if you can go back a slide. Oh yeah, okay, great. I'm just wondering what the red, it looks like there's some inclusionary housing that was in our area in the community 414. So I was just curious if you had any insight as to what that was during that period.
Yeah, I mean, I would assume, I actually haven't looked into the details of what that is, but I would assume that those were the result of land use applications or rezonings led by private applicants. And so those came together to provide these red areas. And so any development that occurred as a result of those upzonings or those zonings that encouraged new development or basically added capacity for new residential development, they could take advantage of that program. But of course, it's voluntary. So if they wanted to. So it's not MIH yet. This only shows the inclusionary housing designated areas, which is basically VIH.
Does that answer your question, Steve?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. We have one more question from Carl Henry Cesar, so please.
Okay. Anybody else before I move on?
Thank you very much, Greg. Oh yeah, David. Hey, yeah, sorry I interrupted a bunch of people.
Go ahead.
So I do have a question. So thank you very much, co-chairs, for putting this together, David, for presenting. Could you go back to the slide with the heat map, please?
This one I think is what you're talking about, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, this is great. Thank you very much.
And so this is a little bit, what I should have said is this is actually a little bit outdated. This I stole from another presentation, so it's a couple of years old. But
sure, no problem,
still shows
and so
friends.
That's fine, because I'm just looking at the legend at the bottom with the different colors. And so basically, what I'm trying to understand is basically if I'm going from, blue towards the, I guess, the dark red / orange, for lack of a better term, does this mean that, the colors from, let's say, yellow through dark red, are those the households that have earned more than the 80% of the AMI?
No, good question. Good question. I should have gone over this a little bit more. So I guess quick background. Are folks familiar with AMI kind of as a concept and where it comes from? Because I'm happy to go into a little bit of detail there. Real quick, ANI, area median income, is calculated. The area is actually calculated by HUD, Department of Housing and Urban Development. And basically, it's across not just the New York City area, but also includes surrounding counties and, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, portions of northern New Jersey, where they look at that whole area and they find kind of the median income. And so that includes, places like the West Village or Chelsea or wherever where folks are, earning quite a lot. And it also includes areas where folks are earning quite a, not nearly as much. And they find that median income. And basically the area median income is that whole large area. So in this heat map, this is actually a change between 2000 and 2008, 2012 ACS, the American Community Survey. So the change in 2000, 2012, this is actually a change over time map, right? So the areas that are darkest red basically said that they gained the highest number of households that are earning less than 80% of the 2012 AMI. So if you're getting 100% of the AMI, you're basically at the median, right? If you're earning less than that, 80%, you're not that far into the median, but obviously, you're still not having an easy time affording New York. Who is? So these are the areas that are in dark red that gained the highest number of households within that economic category. And then the areas in blue, and the darkest blue lost the most households in that economic category, right? So we can see, the Lower East Side, for instance, or the Upper West Side, these two dark blue areas lost a significant number of households that are earning 80% of AMI or less. Meanwhile, we see, South Brooklyn, and some other parts of Queens, as well as the Bronx, gaining a lot of those populations. And that's kind of that economic segregation that we really don't want to see, and we want to try to reverse to make sure at a neighborhood level that places are economically diverse, and that folks at different economic groups of whatever your earning potential is, you still have access to different neighborhoods. Does that answer the question?
It does. Thank you very much for that. I really appreciate it.
Of course. All right. Any more before we move on to MIH?
No, we should probably go ahead and move on. What I'll say is maybe we'll take questions at the very end since we're running short on time. So if you could just proceed with the remainder of your presentation, and we'll take a few questions at the end.
Sure.
Thank you.
All right. No problem. So we get to mandatory inclusionary housing introduced in 2016. So this, for those of you who are really nerdy and like to go into the ZR, that's in section 23-154. The goals is kind of what we were talking about before, except this time's mandatory. You have to take advantage of it. You have to, or not take advantage of it. You have to basically include this affordability. You still get some extra bonuses in that area, but you don't have the option of saying, you know what, we'll give up the bonus. We'll just do all market rate housing. You can't do that. If you're producing basically up to the minimum requirements, which I'll get to in a minute, you have to utilize this. So we want to have that economic diversity at the neighborhood level. It supports as of right housing production and feasibility for a lot of different neighborhoods and a lot of different housing types. So there was a lot of work that went into this that looked at a bunch of different zoning districts, usually our mid and our higher density zoning districts, the R7s and above, usually. It also is used to complement other affordable housing tools, both at the city level and at other areas. So I know we're familiar with a lot of tools used in New York City to produce affordable housing. This is meant to work in tandem with those, and also meant to work with private developments where they're using no subsidy at all. Either way, it produces the affordable housing that we want. These are permanently affordable units as well, which is important to note. And again, it applies where zoning changes or special permits substantially increase permitted residential density. Basically, we're saying we're encouraging, a lot of new residents in this area. Let's make sure that it's economically diverse, right? So these are mapped in conjunction with the rezoning that substantially increases residential capacity, like I said. And once they're mapped, it's required for all new developments within that mapping area, or conversions or enlargements, basically anything that results in at least 10 or more new residential units, or actually more importantly, 12,500 square feet of new floor area, because it actually goes by floor area and not units. But if you're basically doing one or the other of these with your development, you need to utilize MIH and one of the options available. So this is a slide we're going to spend some time on. I know there's a lot of text, but basically throughout a rezoning, where we substantially, increase the potential for housing units, options 1 and options 2 are going to be available for the developer to propose. So the developer will come in, or the applicant, I guess I should say, will come in and say, hey, we're going to rezone this area. Could be a very, very small area, of just a couple of lots, or it can be a much larger area. Or in the case of a city-led rezoning like Gowanus or Soho NoHo, it's, the entire mapping area. They can come forward and say, hey, we're going to map it with options 1 and 2, right? Option 1 basically says that 25% of the square footage, the residential square footage, has to be set aside for units using an average of 60% of AMI. And this number here is for a family of 3. So 64,440, I believe that's still accurate from 2021 because they're re-upped every year from HUD. So a family of 3 would be 64,440, but that can be modified based on, I believe, the unit size as well. If you're doing a studio, it would be less, obviously. And a minimum of 10% of the total needs to be at 40% AMI. So that provides a lot of deep affordability. Option 2 says a little bit more of your square footage needs to be set aside, 30% of your total square footage, and it needs to be set at an average of 80% AMI, right? And this is an average, obviously, so it's not that every unit needs to be at 80% AMI. You might have a certain number at 60, a certain percent at 100, but it needs to average out to basically this 80% AMI level. Then what can be made available later in the process by the city council are these two options, options 3 and options 4. Option 3 often called the deep affordability option. Option 4 often called the workforce option. Option 3 says that 20% needs to be set aside for 40% AMI units. And if you're also using an additional subsidy from one of our other, affordable housing programs that we offer, you actually need to use more or provide more affordability than just the 20%. More of your square footage needs to be set aside. Or the workforce option, it's a little bit more confusing, but 30% AMI at 30% of your square footage for residential units needs to be set at an average of 115% AMI. You cannot use any other subsidies here. This is only for, developers who are just, using kind of the cash they got. A minimum of 5% needs to be at 70% AMI, and a minimum of 5% needs to be at 90% AMI. So then you could work out whatever you want so that your average is still a maximum of 115% AMI. This sunsets after about 10 years. So you actually won't be able to use it 10 years after it's applied, and it's not available in basically anywhere in Lower Manhattan or Midtown, which is CDs 1 and 8. And so when they map an area with this, and I'm thinking of either a private development rezoning or a public city-led rezoning, the whole area is mapped with MIH. And that means that anyone who builds, whether or not they were actually a part of that application, whether or not they were even heck alive at the time that the rezoning occurred, they need to take advantage of one of the options available. That's why it's mandatory. So this is also a little bit outdated, so I apologize. This is from 2018, and these are some of the MIH areas that we've seen. So these dark red swaths, these larger swaths, are usually basically referencing the city-led rezonings because we tend to cover a larger area there. So any development within these larger swaths or these smaller, they look like dots, but there's more than just 1 or 2 properties in much of these dots. So even if it's owned by, another applicant who really had nothing to do with the rezoning, if they choose to redevelop their property, thanks to the new, capacity it has for residential development, they still need to utilize one of the options available. So let's zoom into CD14. There's actually only 4 MIH areas. And I know there's a question earlier about the inclusionary housing designated areas. Those aren't included there. These are only MIH. So, right, these have only been, done since 2016. And so there's 4 areas, 1620 Cortelyou and 1640 Flatbush. And these are both mapped with only option 1. Right. So sometimes there's a mix of different options. Sometimes the city council says, no, because of this area or the specifics here, the applicant or the developer needs to use only this option. If we go up north to these 2 that are closer to Prospect Park, these are interesting because these were rezonings that didn't immediately, they weren't done because of a new residential development. Right? These are done for, a market or a nursing home or something like that. Even if that's the case, if your rezoning actually results in it meets the threshold of a significant increase in residential capacity, that still means that the whole area of the rezoning is still going to be subject to it. So again, when we're doing rezonings, we're really just focused on lines on a map. That's all we're doing. And so the developer will come and they say, hey, we're going to build X, Y, and Z, and that's great. And they should be honest about that, and that's good. But really, when we approve a rezoning with the city, we're really just changing lines on the map, right? We're just saying that now there's capacity here. So that means that somebody else who was or was not involved in rezoning can come in and say, oh, okay, great. Now there's this new capacity here for residential development. I'm going to build. And we say, okay, if you build, you need to take advantage of one of these options, even if it hasn't actually been utilized in that area yet. All right. So a couple of resources. Y'all should know about Zola. If not, let me know. It's the most important tool for anything development-wise or planning-wise in New York City. This link here, which I can send to everybody afterwards, has the AMIs listed for different family sizes, family of 3, family of 1, family of 5, whatever. Different AMI, they kind of do the calculations for you. And then, of course, just services information, the inclusion housing page shows you the overview of voluntary inclusionary housing and mandatory inclusionary housing. And that is all that I've got. So I will shut up and open it up to questions.
Thank you, David, very much. We have just a few more minutes here, so let's ask a few questions. And we know we have the applicant team here, so forgive us if we just go over just a few moments, but it looks like we're going to be able to wrap up shortly. We do have a question from Barton, so please proceed with your question.
Thanks very much. I'm just wondering if by chance you had seen the proposal we're about to see on 1634 Flatbush, and if so, if there's anything to which you might want to direct our attention.
I actually hadn't spent much time on that one. I basically, that rezoning had already been done, before I even got here. And for the specific developments, really what happens is it's up to the Department of Building and HPD to make sure that they're conforming or complying with the MIH option available. So HPD actually, so basically what we do at the City Planning Department or Department of City Planning is we map the area. We make sure that it's mapped and it's in the zoning resolution. And then the applicant needs to actually go to HPD and say, okay, we're actually using, this option. And then they'll show the square footage tables, the units and everything like that. And then DOB, they deal with making sure that it meets the, height, setback, bulk requirements like that. So I haven't really looked at this proposal. I know the rezoning and I know that the city council approved option 1. That's about that. And then, it's really up to HPD to make sure that they're actually complying with it. But you can obviously review these. And I don't believe that the community board has a formal vote on this, but obviously you're notified and the applicant can tell you more about how they're complying with their options.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. All right, we have one more question and then I think we'll wrap our
Thank you.
committee for this evening. We have Edward Sen.
Thanks, Greg, and thanks for the presentation, David. Just a quick question regarding option 1. So 25% of, let's say, some random number, are we rounding up or down to meet 25%? Is there a specific criteria?
I apologize. You mean of the square?
So let's say
Yeah. Oh, yeah,
25%.
because it's of your residential. Sorry, you can go on. I think I have a delay here.
No. So let's say 25% of 171. That brings us to, I don't know, 23.75, I think. So do we round up or do we round down?
Yeah. So it's actually by the square footage. Right.
I see.
So it goes by the square footage, in fact. And I actually don't know. I don't know off the top of my head if it's round up or round down, but something I didn't touch upon that I know I'm running out of time, but I'll do very quickly, is the reason they go by square footage is because obviously units can come in many different sizes, right? Some are studio units, some are, big 3 or 4 bedrooms or something like that. And something I touched on earlier is there needs to be a mix of the units. You basically have to sprinkle in the affordable units. Basically, you can't just have them all at the lower floors or all at the upper floors, or you can't have all the affordable units be studios or all the affordable units be the 3 bedrooms. They need to be basically proportional. So that's why they go by square footage. So it's not always by the percentage of units. I don't know off the top of my head exactly whether they're rounding up or rounding down, but the square footage numbers are usually, 100,000, they're big there. So it usually comes out to be something, pretty specific. Whereas if it's a smaller number of units, they're only producing, let's say, like 15 units, then that number becomes much more important, right? But they go by square footage here.
Got it. Thanks. And just for the record, 25% of 171 is 72.75. So thanks.
Thank you. Okay, David. Yeah. So thank you so much for joining us today.
That I can check up on those details.
That would be great. And if we, Sean, we will probably post this presentation or could on the website for further, for further reference.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it will be recorded and up on the website, and we really do appreciate this extra tutoring. Especially, community boards around the city are asking their respective borough presidents to assist with more land use training. And David, you've been so kind to come to us more than once to do this for us. So thank you.
Yes, thank you very much.
Of course, not a problem. Happy to do it.
All right, great. So at this point, I think what we'll do is we will end the committee meeting as it stands, and I will turn it over to our board chair, Joanne Brown, to proceed with the public hearing that's scheduled for this evening.
Hi, good evening, everyone. First, thank you so much, Greg and Talisha, for running such a wonderful presentation. Thank you very much, David, for educating us once again. And shameless plug that we have our Lunch and Learn series on our YouTube channel. If you want to know more about zoning, you can watch that anytime you want. Before we get started with this public hearing, I just want to recognize representatives of elected officials. We have Joelle Dusauvet from representing Councilmember Rita Joseph, and Anthony Drummond representing Councilmember Farrah Lewis. Thanks for being here. And we'll get started. This public hearing is called to order at 7:04 p.m. on Monday, April 4th, 2022 via WebEx. The purpose of this hearing is to hear testimony with respect to an affordable housing plan application pursuant to the Mandatory Inclusionary Housing Program, MIH. The applicant has filed an application seeking the MIH option for compliance with affordable housing requirements ZR 23-154, paragraph D, 3, items 1 through 4, to facilitate the development of a 13-story mixed-use 171 dwelling unit building with 42 mandatory inclusionary housing units and 129 market rate units. The board previously reviewed the zoning change, which included the requirements that the building comply with the Mandatory Inclusionary Housing Program. That program requires that the developer provide the community board with the opportunity to review the application filed with HPD, Housing Preservation and Development, and to submit comments within 45 days of receipt of the application material. There is no borough president, city planning, or city council review of this application. It is only subject to approval by Housing Preservation and Development. The Uniform Land Use Review Procedure, ULURP, application number C190053 ZMK was submitted on December 5th, 2019 by the applicant 1640 Flatbush Owner LLC, a zoning map amendment to rezone the development site at 1640 Flatbush Avenue, Block 7577, Lot 60, from a C8-2 to an R6 zoning district to a C4-4D zoning district, and to rezone portions of two adjacent properties, Block 7577, Lot 25, and Block 7576, Lot 69, from C8-2 zoning to an R6 zoning district between East 32nd Street and Aurelia Court in Community District 14. At that time, the applicant also filed a related ULURP application, number N190054 ZRK, seeking a zoning text amendment to amend zoning resolution ZR to designate the development site as Mandatory Inclusionary Housing Area, Appendix F, to facilitate the development of a 13-story plus cellar mixed-use building with retail on the first and second floors and residential above, which would include approximately 34 units of affordable housing. Therefore, the total number of units and the number of affordable units has been revised since the last time the board reviewed this matter. At the time, the board recommended the approval of the above applications with the following list of conditions. 1, applicant will provide evidence of a shadow study satisfied on 12/13/2018 and attached. Applicant will consult with New York City Department of Transportation to evaluate feasibility of relocating the entrances dedicated to residential areas, retail and/or medical space, and associated loading and unloading areas to Flatbush Avenue from their current planned locations on Aurelia Court. 3, applicant will reach an agreement with former council member Jamani Williams on MIH Affordable Option 1, which set aside 25% of the residential space for tenants earning no more than 60% of the area mean income average, including 10% at 40% of AMI. If you would like to speak on this issue, you may use the raise hand function when we move into that portion of the hearing. Please clearly state your name. Please state clearly for the record your name and organization prior to giving testimony. The first speaker will be Representative Kenneth Lowenstein, Holland and Knight LLP. Welcome.
Good evening, and thank you for giving us the opportunity to present. I'm going to ask our architect to do the bulk of the presentation, but I just want to say that we believe we do comply with all the requirements that were outlined by the representative from City Planning. It is an option. We are using option 1. We've submitted, and you have copies of the materials we submitted to HPD, which demonstrate, we think, that we do comply with all the requirements of the program as described in detail. We can go into more detail, obviously, as you request. And I think just to keep things moving, I would just ask Leah Lasry from the architect to present the project briefly, and then we're available to answer all your questions.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I would like to share my screen if it's possible, so I can show you the presentation that I have regarding the project. So if everyone can see, this is our proposition for 1634 Flatbush Avenue. It's a 13-story mixed-use building at the corner of Flatbush Avenue and Aurelia Court. We are proposing commercial on the cellar and first floor, parking on the second floor, and we have after that the rest of the floor for residential unit. Let me open. So regarding the facade, we were really trying to emphasize on the mixed use of the neighborhood with very large retail glaze area. We have some brick to link with the rest of the building from the neighborhood. And we have the rest of the facade with stucco panel that for a pretty modern look. Let me open the rest of the presentation. So this is, as you can see, because the area has a lot of like big major retailer, we also focus our building with like a corner commercial, and we wanted to have those two floors of commercial, the cellar and the first floor. Can go over quickly regarding the rest of the program. So this is our first floor plan. We have some entrance, the commercial entrance over Flatbush Avenue, and we have the residential, some entrance also for the commercial on Aurelia Court. This is the first one and the second one at the corner. And we have two residential lobby for the residential portion. On Aurelia Court, you can see that we also have our parking ramp that going up to the second floor. The second floor also have our laundry room, the bicycle parking. It's a Tenzi parking for all of the residents. And if we continue on the upper floors, so we have a typical floor from third. We have 7 basically typical floor with 16 apartments. And as we continue moving forward to the rest of the floor, we're starting to have terraces and dormers from the 10th floor up to the 13th floor. And we have some amenities on the 13th floor. Those amenities are including pet spa, gym. We have also a full rooftop outdoor space, co-working space, and all of those amenities are accessible for the entire building for free. So it's the market apartment as well as the affordable proposition. Regarding the MIH, we did the first the presentation with HPD. I can show you quickly. So we're complying with the 25% global square footage, and this is partition within like 42 apartments. 50% of those are 2-bedroom, 25% 1-bedroom, 25% studio. And as you can see on those diagrams, it's partitioned throughout the floors within that mix. So we don't have any affordable just on one story. You can see that we have the blue is the affordable and the green one as the market. So we comply with those requirements, and Kenneth can answer on more in more detail regarding the AMI and the rest of the MIH requirement. You can let me know if you have any question or if we should go over more detail.
Thank you very much for that presentation. I think what we'll do is address questions, and you can answer those questions as they come up. In the spirit of this being a public hearing, I'm going to call on the members of the public first, and then board members. I believe I have a member of the public named member of the public who has their hand up, and the name is Sasha.
Hi, yes, my name is Sasha. I'm a member of the public, and I also live in Flatbush. I was wondering if will they have any 3-bedroom apartments, and is it possible to give more affordable housing, maybe half of the units that's going to be in the building? We need more affordable housing in this neighborhood to accommodate families and incomes that have dropped due to COVID, to make the apartments available and affordable to all. So I'm requesting more affordable housing units in this neighborhood.
So regarding our proposition, we having as of right now, like purely MIH, 25% of the overall residential square foot that are going to be given for MIH. We are also applying for the 421A program, so there's also some units that like with different like AMI requirements that are going to be given for affordable. There is no 3-bedroom apartment in the entire project. So this is why we're just giving up, like we're giving up from the MIH, 25% for 50% for the 2-bedroom, 25 studio, 25% 1-bedroom as the MIH requirement asking us to do that. So no 3-bedroom in the entire building. We cannot really give up any 3-bedroom.
I will, oh, I have a question from the public. Billy Richling, please go ahead.
Hi, thanks for the present. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Thanks for the presentation. Can I just ask, can you may have said this and I missed it, the number of parking spaces relative to the number of units, and also is the parking required by the zoning, or are you, as the developer, just choosing to include that parking?
So yeah, the parking requirements are mandatory per the zoning in that neighborhood. So let me give you the exact number. We have a total of 52 parking space required for 171 units. And we're going to have, it's going to be an attendee parking due to the shape of the lot. We had a lot of, like we wanted to have commercial and keep our parking just to 1 story. So we're going to need the attendee and we're complying with that 52 parking spot in between like regular spot and some stacker. This is why we have like a full attendee parking with a loading zone, some ADS spot. So we're complying with all of those zoning requirements.
Thanks.
Thank you. I'll kick off the questions from board members. So in looking at the plans, you actually had a schedule on your plans that said there was 1 3-bedroom apartment, 858 square feet at market rate. Is that incorrect?
Let me check that right now. I know that it was part of a previous, like an original submission we had, but I think it was removed after the DOB appointment. So let me check now if we still have it or no. In my revised chart, but we don't have it anymore. So the new document will be refiled to HPD, and there is no 3-bedroom.
Okay, thank you for clarification. Next question that I have is, can you explain why there are 2 residential entrances with 12 mailboxes each?
So the idea behind the building is also qualifying ground floor. So we need to, in order to gain a certain height and have nicer apartments, in order to comply with those qualifying ground floor requirements, the intent of the code is giving us some kind of density, number of apartments that we can put per floor, because that building, the lot is pretty big. The idea behind that is to keep for each neighbor to kind of know the neighbors. So the building is partitioned in that sense with 2 lobbies, and it was part of the DOB process that we've been filing. They want to have 2 separate core and 2 different entrances in order for each part of the building to know their neighbor. If we exceed a certain number, They wanted basically us to separate the core. This is why we had a little redesign process with them, and they asked us to separate both elevator and both lobbies. So basically the user are going to know their neighbor more easily, because each and every one can actually go to one section of the building or the second section. So if you see on the plan, it's still the same building, but we have a little vestibule in the middle, and it was requested by DOB basically in order to have more of a community feeling.
Okay, so you're saying that the doors that connect core 1 and core 2 will remain open so that a user that lives in core 1 can go through those fire doors and use the other elevator. So everyone has access to both cores, but they're just split into 2 different communities. Because I did notice that there is a bit of a saturation of the affordable units in one core versus the other. Not major, but I'm just trying to make sure that there still is accessibility between the 2 cores.
Yeah, there's full accessibility, and it was something that came up like after the choice of the unit. The choice of the unit for the affordable was really, we were trying to choose unit, we need to comply with the average. So the affordable units need to be above that average. So in order to do that, we couldn't like choose the smaller unit, we needed to go to a certain percentage. After DOB came back with that kind of separation. So yes, those doors are going to be open at all time. We also have just one refuse room. The food amenity are just circulating through one corridor, but they did request to have 2 separate lobbies in order for the occupant to be like a little bit more separated and to have a little bit more space, which we did, and we comply with their requirement, but as well with the MIH. We didn't want to segregate. Even for the outdoor, we provided the same amount of apartment with outdoor space for the MIH, the affordable unit, and for the market. So the proportionality is really respected in that sense.
Thank you for your answer. I'll move on to other board members, and then I just have one other comment. Steve Cohen, board member, your hand is up. Please feel free to go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have 2 questions. First, when do you anticipate the building opening? And second, it looks like there was a gas station on the property, so I just want to make sure that an environmental impact study took place already. Thank you.
Yeah, so we did the full research regarding like with OER, it's part of the OER, so we have like a noise component, and we have also an air quality component. All of those research are already like far advanced, so everything is going to be depolluted, and we have like a full protocol regarding that. So this is for the gas station, and because we in the OER zone, actually the project has like all of those OER, we're going to have a very good quality of window, and they're going to make sure that they depollute everything. It's part of like the ownership program. Regarding the schedule, I'm not sure if the construction team should be on the call too and can answer better. I know that they are anticipating to start pretty soon construction, but I don't have really a date of completion for you. So if Moti is on the line, or Joel, if someone can just answer to that question.
Hi, my name is Moti Levy from Empire Management and Construction. We are doing as owner's representative and for the project, and we anticipate to start with the SOE and foundation. We hope within the next 3-4 weeks. We are dealing, as just discussed, we're dealing now with the environmental department in regard to make sure that the contamination or the soil and everything else is being cleared up, and all approvals from the environmental DEP, DEC departments. We anticipate, we cannot say exactly, as we're ready for hiccups as all construction projects have throughout, but we assume that this project is by the end of 2023 we should have go file for the CLO. Hopefully.
Thank you for that.
Next question is from Talisha Sainville, board member.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I actually had the same question as Stephen did, but I just want a clarification from the architect and possibly the owner's rep that there is currently some kind of remediation work going on in terms of the environmental in terms of environmental, there is some remediation work that needs to be done. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's correct. So they have, we basically like submit everything necessary. The mechanical submission is also complying with a lot of their requirements because we cannot really use certain gas equipment. So all of that has been actually submitted. I can re-follow up and make sure where they're up to with the procedure, but nothing cannot really be started. And DSOE need a remediation plan before the start, so nothing is going to be started before that. So we'll touch base on that and see where they up to. But all of those procedure and inspection, everything is going to be done as we're moving forward. We're not going to be able to start SOE without that.
Okay, so that work hasn't begun yet. Any of the remediation work that hasn't begun yet, but if you're planning on breaking ground in 3 to 4 weeks, as Moti just explained, any kind of remediation and extra testing will happen within the next week or so. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right.
Madam Chair, may I jump in on this? Because we do have record in the office. This was a brownfield site, and it was addressed through the regular federal process in 2016 prior to the original application that came before the board in 2018. So whatever needs to happen now would be in addition to that, but I will provide the records from the brownfield site. I'm a little bit confused as to why there's still a cleanup on the docket if that had been completed in 2016. Perhaps the applicant can shed more light on this being in addition to the federal guidelines.
No, everything was cleaned as far as I know. It's just that the tanks, they mentioned, I think, I forgot who mentioned about the tanks. Maybe forgot the name who mentioned about the tanks. The tanks is the last thing that we need to do and remove it. It's a separate filing which we need to file before we remove the actual tanks. The ground and everything else was remediated and cleaned prior.
Thank you very much. Next question will be from Darlene Bowers, board member.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions about the commercial. I didn't know if we want to discuss that tonight. Is that okay, Sean?
We can take a short question about that.
Yeah, it sort of went over my head about what size the commercial space you're planning on and what type of tenant base you're expecting.
So as of right now, we have around 12,000 gross square foot of commercial on the first floor, and we have 13,000 pretty much on the cellar. I let ownership, and we run a couple of like scenario. I let ownership answer if they have like more lead on the tenant, but yeah, it's probably going to be retail.
Okay, so was there any type of market study done to determine if there was actually a need for additional commercial space in that area?
Modi, do you want to jump or?
I didn't understand the question. Basically, we are still flexible for any kind of commercial. I know we're working, not me, basically the upper ownership are working with brokers to see what's required in the area and how to market exactly and have the space divided for the community's needs.
Okay, and there would not be any parking for the customers?
So due to the size of the commercial currently, the parking is not required for most of the use. It's a bit too small. We do have a loading dock requirement that we incorporated, but the parking shouldn't be needed for any type of retail with the current site. And it was confirmed by DOB.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, the rest of the floor plan is still very flexible and open. We have a bunch of entrance, and we have those large glazing with open space to below, so we can also have like light on the cellar. But all of that is going to be adjusted as we're moving with construction and we're receiving more input from the broker on the market.
Thank you very much. Next question will be from Carl Henry Cesar, board member. You're muted.
Am I still muted? Okay. User error on my part. Sorry, folks. So good evening. I have a few questions. I'll be brief. And so, Leah, I'm looking at something that was shared with the community board, and like you had mentioned, it may not be the most updated one since the HPD. And so my question is, this one that I'm looking at, it says there's 171 total units, and there was a 1 3-bedroom unit. So since that unit is not in the picture anymore, does this mean that the proposal is 170 total units?
No, it's still 171. It's just due to the shape. Like that 3-bedroom was coming from a particular shape that we were testing for the terrace, and it was like the only way to attach really that bedroom. We still had 171 units. It's just there's no more 3-bedroom. We changed the terrace in order to just propose 2-bedroom and remove that unit that was a bit complicated anyway. I'm sure the plan are accessible somewhere. I'm not sure exactly how it's working, but yeah, it's still the same number of units, just that 2-bedroom became that 3-bedroom became a 2-bedroom. Sorry.
Okay, understood. And so then the next thing I too have, I'm confirming, is the breakdown of units still the same, where it would be 36 0-bedroom, 72 1-bedroom, I guess 63 2-bedroom.
So let me confirm you that.
Because basically what I'm just confirming is right now the current distribution is it that roughly 63 to 64% of these proposed units are going to be 0-bedroom to 1-bedrooms.
So we have, yes, 36, 72, and 73 2-bedroom.
Okay, got it. Thank you. And then the next question I have too is, you know, one of the members of the public asked about the 3-bedrooms, and other people are asking about, you know, housing stock, right? And so my question is, as these units get built, is there any looking into, you know, accessibility for people who have limited mobility and also our senior population?
So yeah, we do comply with all of the, so we have some selected UFAS units. This represents a total of 5% for the low mobility, 2.5% for hearing and vision impairment. And this is partitioned equally, like proportionally between the market unit and the MIH unit. So you're going to find some units that have been selected under both categories, under different range of apartments. In any case, all of our apartments can all be accessible, potentially like adaptable. They all adaptable, and ownership can just come and adapt certain sort of apartment because we do comply with all of the accessibility clearance in terms of door. They will just need to come and change the size of the cabinet, change the vanity under the bathroom. So the roof of the apartment are all complying. It's just we have some unit that has been selected per those criteria, and they're going to be installed up front. But the rest of the unit also have reinforcement for grab bar, and all of the apartment, if a tenant, an handicapped tenant is coming and all of the UFAS units are being filled, there's always that possibility from ownership to adapt one of the units that are currently not for low mobility or hearing and vision. And regarding the hearing and vision apartment, we also have like an alarm system with like a beeping, like a visual mechanism, and also an auditive alarm for all of those apartments. So we do comply in that sense. And everything was selected and reviewed by HPD.
Thank you very much for that, Leah.
Thank you. Just a bit of housekeeping. If you've asked a question, please lower your hand. Moti, you have your hand up. Did you have something that you wanted to add, or is it just up?
Oh, it's a mistake. Let me take it down.
Okay, thanks. Next question will be from Barden Prasant, board member.
Hi there. I may have been mistaken, but did I hear a reference to maybe 2 adjacent lots also being rezoned? I was wrong. I was right.
No, you're right. That was done, I believe, the first time that came before the board.
And those lots are not owned by this developer, or?
Barden, I think that's correct. I think they were trying to do some housekeeping on those lots to bring them more in line with what the buildings were. I think they were non-compliant buildings, so they were bringing them into compliance.
Okay, but was the FAR raised part of that rezoning, like from the 3.4 to 7.2?
No. Well, no. I think what it did was match what those buildings were. I'll have to go back and look, but
okay,
I think that's what it was.
You see the tree up, which I'm barking, but it seems you're not concerned, so I'm totally cool with it. Thank you.
The next question is from District Manager Sean Campbell.
Oh, okay, I was trying to get it together. A couple of things. One, on the in terms of the applications from the community for the affordable units, will 50% of the units be held aside for community preference prior to the lottery? Kenneth, you're muted. I think you're trying to answer that.
Sorry, the units will be marketed through the HPD lottery Housing Connect process, and they do have they do have a preference, yes.
Okay, and could we suggest that you work with our local community-based organizations to market the affordable application process, and to work with our community members so that they are poised and ready to apply for those apartments?
Of course, and I think HPD requires us to do that as well.
Okay, we're happy to facilitate introductions in the neighborhood. And then just a little clarification on the commercial use. The loading dock was an issue that came up a few years ago. Could you remind me where the loading dock is? And before I forget to say this, also agree to work with our local business improvement district. The Flatbush Nostrand Junction bid is led by Kenneth Mbuno, who I think would be helpful in terms of identifying a useful commercial tenant. But where is the loading dock in the plan?
So it's currently on Aurelia Court. So we have one curb cut for the parking entrance, and we have the loading dock right after. It's been positioned 23 feet from the district zoning boundary. As per, we did receive like a comment on that because it was too close from the district boundary. So we put it a little further. But yeah, we have both entrance on Aurelia Court. We didn't want to be close to the corner. So we have the parking entrance on the first hand and the loading dock 23 feet after that zoning district boundary line.
Yeah, the comment from this board originally was that a loading dock on Aurelia Court would be disruptive to the already residential neighbors on Aurelia Court. There was a request that consideration be given to a loading dock on Flatbush Avenue instead. And maybe that was considered and it was concluded that it couldn't happen. But I just want to reiterate it since it's a matter of public record from this board and a matter of public record from then Borough President Eric L. Adams. Thank you.
So I didn't hear about it. Maybe Kenneth has more information than me on that, but it's something we can definitely look into it if it's necessary.
I'm not familiar with that issue either.
It was one of the conditions of the approval from the board and
No,
the borough president.
I saw that. Up.
Thank you. Next question will be from Anne Gaudette, board member.
Thank you, Joanne. Thank you very much for the presentation. I recall two of my questions. Thank you, Sean, you posed. I recall hearing that the now non-existent 3-bedroom apartment was roughly 850-ish square feet, which is pretty small. What is the square footage of the units that are on so the average 1-bedroom, the average studio, 2 bedrooms? What are the average sizes of those, please? Thank you very much.
So let me open that. So for the studio, we the average is 375. For the MIH, 360 for the market unit. For the 1-bedroom, we at 500 for the MIH unit, 523, and a little less than 500 for the 1-bedroom. And the 2-bedroom are at 762 for the 2-bedroom MIH and 740 square foot basically for the market unit.
So the MIH 2 bedrooms are larger than the market rate 2 bedrooms. Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
Or did I hear that backwards?
All the MLH units are on the average size of the MLH units for the studio 1s and 2s are larger than the market rate units. That's correct in all 3 categories.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I don't see any other hands. I just have 2 comments. I read in the CPC report that perhaps there might be an extension of local preference to include zip code 11210, which encompasses portions of Brooklyn Community District 17 and 18. Does that sound familiar to you? Do you know if that's part of that 50% set aside is going to be in these 2 additional community districts?
It's HPD determines how the community preference is implemented. We have nothing to say on that decision. So that's something you should take up with HPD.
Okay, thank you. I was just asking a
But
question.
I mean, the marketing process doesn't start obviously this early in the process, so we would not have had it. But in any event, it's completely HPD's decision. We have no input in how they implement, how they decide, what they decide.
Okay, thank you for your answer. Seeing no other questions or hands raised, tonight's recommendation from board members is that Housing and Preservation Development consider the comments generated by this public hearing. So we're not necessarily making a recommendation about the project, but that the project be considered. Sean Campbell, you have your hand up.
I was only going to read off the comments that I gathered unless you were taking your own notes. Let me know if I can be helpful.
Oh, no, please go ahead.
What I heard was urging the development or addition of 3-bedroom units to this plan, urging the consideration that the applicant increase the number of affordable apartments beyond the minimum required, ensuring the applicant should ensure that the affordable units are equally partitioned or distributed between the 2 cores or entrances of the building. There will be a review of the possibility of moving the loading dock from Aurelia Court to Flatbush Avenue. And I think those are the notes or the comments to the applicant. And then an additional follow-up with HPD to ensure community board 14 preference over zip code preference. And there had been comments in the previous to include people who lived in over rent burdened and overcrowded units in the district as well. And I'll jot down anything that anybody wants to shout out that I've missed.
Thank you very much, Sean, for reiterating the comments that we heard tonight. So again, the recommendation from board members will be that Housing Preservation and Development consider these comments generated by the public hearing. So I will go ahead and, ask the board members here in attendance in the reverse order if there's anyone that chooses not to make this recommendation to the full board at the next general meeting. Does anyone here wish to abstain? Is anyone here ineligible to make this recommendation? Seeing none, the comments that District Manager Sean Campbell has read in this public hearing shall be part of the comments that we will submit to Housing and Preservation, and any comments that we should receive via email. If you have any other concerns, please feel free to send them to the board office. That's info at, it's on our website, sorry. I'm having a little brain thing. Okay. Well, that being said, let me go back to my script. I want to thank the representatives of the applicant for being here and for your patience in answering our questions. We will go ahead and close this public hearing. This public hearing is concluding at 7:48 p.m. Thank you, everyone, for your patience and attention.
Thanks, everyone.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Bye.